I need you to stop scrolling right now. What I'm about to share with you over the next 20 minutes could be the most important conversation you have about your brain this year. After 28 years as a neurologist, there's one question my patients ask me more than any other. They sit across from me, sometimes with a spouse, sometimes alone, and they say, "Doctor, am I losing my mind?" Today, I am going to answer that question the way I answer it in my exam room. Not with platitudes, not with reassurance designed to send you home feeling better, with the truth. I'm Dr. Evelyn Ashford. I'm a board-certified neurologist. I completed my fellowship in cognitive disorders at Johns Hopkins. For the last 28 years, I've practiced at the Northeast Neurology Institute, where I specialize in age-related neurodegenerative disease. I'm the author of 2 books on brain aging and cognitive longevity. I have personally evaluated thousands of patients for memory complaints. And what I am going to tell you today is the pattern I see again and again: early signs of dementia that are missed in primary care offices every single day, often for years, until it is too late to do the most good. By the end of this video, you will know 5 specific early warning signs that I look for in my own practice. Number 1 on this list is something almost no one over 65 knows about, and a 2022 study from the National Institute on Aging found it was associated with a 22% higher chance of developing mild cognitive impairment for every single point of decline. Stay with me. Don't skip ahead. Every one of these signs has a mechanism, and once you understand the mechanism, you understand your own brain. Before we go any further, I want to be clear about something. This content is for educational purposes only. It is not personalized medical advice. Nothing I share today is intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. If you are taking medication, do not stop or change anything without speaking to your own physician. The information here is the result of decades of clinical observation and peer-reviewed research, but your health decisions belong with you and your doctor. I take that boundary seriously, and you should too. Now, before we get into the list, I want you to do something for me. In the comments below, tell me your age and tell me one cognitive symptom you've noticed in the last 12 months, even a small one. Forgetting a name, walking into a room and forgetting why, trouble following a conversation in a crowded restaurant. I read every comment on this channel, and the patterns I see in those answers shape every video I make. Take 10 seconds. It matters more than you know, because you are not the only one experiencing what you are experiencing, and the patterns we see in this community are often more honest than what shows up in clinical trials. Let's begin. Number 5 on my list of early warning signs that most doctors miss is one that has been called by a 2020 report from the Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention, the single largest modifiable risk factor for dementia in the world, and almost nobody over 60 is taking it seriously. I am talking about hearing loss, not deafness, not the kind of hearing loss where you can't hear a fire alarm. I am talking about the slow, quiet, gradual decline in the ability to distinguish consonants in conversation. The kind of hearing loss where your spouse says you're mumbling, and the truth is you simply cannot hear the high-frequency sounds that give speech its clarity anymore. A landmark series of studies from Johns Hopkins, led by researchers in the Department of Otolaryngology, found that adults with mild hearing loss had nearly twice the risk of developing dementia compared to peers with normal hearing. Those with moderate hearing loss had 3 times the risk, and those with severe hearing loss had up to 5 times the risk. The 2020 Lancet Commission estimated that hearing loss alone accounts for approximately 8% of all dementia cases worldwide, more than smoking, more than physical inactivity, more than diabetes. Now, I want you to understand the mechanism here, because this is the part most physicians don't have time to explain. When the inner ear, specifically the cochlea, can no longer transmit a clean auditory signal, the brain has to work harder to interpret sound. The auditory cortex and the prefrontal cortex enter into a state of chronic compensation. Neuroscientists call this increased cognitive load. Over years, that constant strain redirects neural resources away from memory consolidation in the hippocampus. At the same time, untreated hearing loss leads to social withdrawal. And social isolation is itself a powerful driver of neuroinflammation and microglial activation. The brain, deprived of stimulation, begins to atrophy. Specifically, MRI studies have shown accelerated gray matter loss in the temporal lobe in adults with untreated hearing loss. Let me tell you about a patient. I'll call her Eleanor. She was 72 when she came to my office, a retired school teacher, brought in by her daughter because the family had noticed she was repeating questions. Her primary care physician had already ordered a basic memory screen, the mini mental state examination, and she scored within normal limits. He told her she was fine, but Eleanor's daughter knew something was wrong. When I sat down with Eleanor, I noticed she watched my mouth when I spoke. I asked her when she had last had her hearing tested. She couldn't remember. We ran an audiogram. She had moderate to severe high-frequency hearing loss in both ears. She had been compensating for years, reading lips, nodding through conversations she couldn't follow, withdrawing from family dinners. We fitted her with hearing aids. Within 4 months, her family reported that she was sharper, more engaged, telling stories at the dinner table again. Her repeat cognitive testing showed measurable improvement. Was her brain healed? No. But the cognitive load had been lifted. Her hippocampus was free to do what it was designed to do. So here is what I want you to do. If you are over 60 and you have not had a formal audiogram in the last 2 years, schedule one. Not a screening, a full audiogram with an audiologist. If hearing aids are recommended, get them. The evidence-based protocol from the Achieve randomized controlled trial, published in 2023 in the Lancet, suggests that consistent hearing aid use, ideally 6 to 8 hours per day, may slow cognitive decline in at-risk older adults by up to 48% over a 3-year follow-up period. That is not a supplement. That is not a drug. That is a device that sits behind your ear, and most people will not get one because they are embarrassed. That's number 5. But what comes next compounds this effect, and most people are doing it backwards. Number 4 is something you may have experienced this morning and brushed off. You stood up from a chair and the room tilted. You felt lightheaded for a few seconds. You grabbed the counter, took a breath, and the moment passed. You probably haven't told your doctor. You probably attribute it to standing up too fast. I want you to stop dismissing it. What you are describing is called orthostatic hypotension, a drop of at least 20 millimeters of mercury in systolic blood pressure within 3 minutes of standing. And a landmark 2017 study from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, drawing on the atherosclerosis risk in communities cohort of more than 11,000 adults, found that people with orthostatic hypotension in midlife were 40% more likely to develop dementia 20 years later, and showed 15% more cognitive decline overall. This is not theory. This is cellular biology. When your blood pressure drops on standing, your brain experiences a brief but real episode of hypoperfusion, a moment of inadequate blood flow. Repeat this hundreds of times across years, and the small vessels of your brain, the ones that supply oxygen and glucose to the deep white matter, sustain microscopic damage. We call this cerebral small vessel disease. It is one of the leading vascular contributors to dementia. The Rotterdam study, a Dutch population-based investigation following thousands of older adults for over 20 years, confirmed that orthostatic hypotension was associated with a 15% increase in long-term dementia risk, particularly in those whose heart rate failed to compensate for the blood pressure drop. I had a patient, Walter, 68, recently retired executive. He came to me complaining of brain fog and trouble concentrating in meetings. His cardiologist had told him his blood pressure was well controlled. When I checked it lying down, then standing, his systolic dropped 28 points within 90 seconds. His own doctor had never measured it that way. We discovered that the combination of 2 of his blood pressure medications was driving him into orthostatic hypotension multiple times a day. I worked with his cardiologist, and I want to be clear, I did not stop or adjust his medications myself. We collaborated. They reduced one medication. He started a hydration protocol, 64 ounces of water a day with electrolytes added in the morning. He started compression stockings. Within 12 weeks, his standing blood pressure stabilized, and his self-reported brain fog had improved by what he estimated as 70%. What can you do? Ask your physician at your next visit to take an orthostatic blood pressure reading. It takes 90 seconds. They lie you down for 5 minutes, take a reading, then stand you up and take a reading at 1 minute and 3 minutes. If your systolic drops more than 20 or your diastolic drops more than 10, you have orthostatic hypotension, and that needs to be addressed through hydration, through medication review, sometimes through compression garments. Do not let this be ignored. Your brain is paying the price for every episode. That brings us to number 4, complete. The next sign is one I see every single week in my clinic, and I would estimate 90% of primary care doctors do not measure it. Number 3 on this list is a slowing of your walking speed. I want you to understand something that most physicians don't have time to explain. Your gait, the speed and rhythm with which you walk across a room, is not just a function of your legs and your knees, it is a function of your brain. Specifically, walking at a normal pace requires the coordinated activity of the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, and the supplementary motor area, all communicating through white matter tracts that run the length of your brain. When those tracts are damaged by small vessel disease, by early neurodegenerative changes, by the accumulation of beta amyloid plaques, your gait slows before your memory does. A 2022 study from the Gothenburg H70 birth cohort studies in Sweden, published in Alzheimer's and Dementia, followed 287 adults over 15 years. The findings were striking. Slowing of normal gait speed was found to emerge up to 9 years before cognitive symptoms became detectable on standard testing. 9 years. Furthermore, the slower gait was correlated with abnormal cerebrospinal fluid beta amyloid concentrations, meaning the underlying Alzheimer's pathology was already present silently, while the patient was still scoring normally on memory tests. A separate 2022 analysis published in JAMA Network Open, drawing on data from nearly 17,000 adults in the ASPRE trial, found that adults with slow baseline gait speed had a 63% higher risk of incident dementia and a 43% higher risk of cognitive decline over a follow-up period of nearly 5 years. Margaret was 75 when her son brought her to my office. He'd noticed she was walking more slowly across the parking lot. Her primary care doctor had attributed it to just getting older and her arthritis. I had her perform a timed walk, a simple test, 4 meters at usual pace. Her speed was 0.7 meters per second. The threshold for concern in adults over 70 is generally considered to be 1 meter per second. Margaret was significantly below that. We ordered a brain MRI. She had moderate periventricular white matter hyperintensities, markers of small vessel disease, and mild hippocampal atrophy. Her MoCA score, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, was 24 out of 30, just below normal. We had caught her in the prodromal phase. We started an aggressive intervention, blood pressure optimization, supervised resistance training twice per week, a Mediterranean-style dietary pattern, and cognitive engagement protocols. 2 years later, her MoCA had risen to 27, and her gait speed had improved to 1.1 meters per second. Here is your protocol. Time yourself walking 4 meters at your normal, comfortable pace. Use the stopwatch on your phone. If you take longer than 4 seconds, meaning your gait speed is slower than 1 meter per second, bring this number to your physician. Ask for a referral to a neurologist or a geriatric specialist. Do not let it be dismissed. And whether your gait speed is slow or normal, begin a structured program of resistance training and Zone 2 cardiovascular exercise. 20 minutes of moderate aerobic activity, 4 days per week, ideally before noon. The evidence on exercise increasing brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, and supporting synaptic plasticity is overwhelming. Your legs are connected to your brain in ways most people never appreciate. That is number 3. But what I am about to tell you next is the sign I find most often missed, because it does not look like a brain problem at all. It looks like a personality change. Let me pause for a moment. I know what you might be thinking. You're thinking, I'm too far gone for this, or my memory is already declining. What difference does it make now? I want to tell you what I tell every patient who walks into my office at 70, 75, even 80. Your brain is not a fixed organ. It is plastic. It is responsive. It is, until your last day on Earth, capable of building new connections. The science of neuroplasticity is unambiguous on this point. The window does not close. Researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital have demonstrated measurable increases in hippocampal volume in adults in their 70s after just 1 year of structured aerobic exercise. The capacity is there. What is required is the signal. And the signals you send your brain through movement, through sleep, through nutrition, through human connection, those are the inputs that determine the trajectory. If this is the kind of conversation you wish your own doctor would have with you, subscribe to this channel. I release new videos every week explaining the neuroscience behind the symptoms you've been told to ignore. There are millions of adults over 60 in this country who deserve a more thorough explanation of what is happening inside their bodies, and I make these videos for them. Now let's continue. Number 2 on my list is the warning sign I see most often confused with depression, with grief, with just getting older. It is apathy. And I want to be precise about what I mean because apathy is not the same as sadness. A depressed person feels miserable. An apathetic person feels nothing. They lose interest in the activities that used to bring them joy, not because those activities feel painful, but because the motivational engine of the brain has gone quiet. A 2020 study from the University of Cambridge, published in the journal Alzheimer's Research and Therapy, followed over 600 adults at genetic risk for frontotemporal dementia. Researchers found that apathy could predict the onset of dementia many years before any memory symptoms appeared, and was directly correlated with shrinkage in specific frontal regions of the brain on MRI. A separate landmark analysis from Radboud University and St. George's University in London, published in the Journal of Neurology, Neurosurgery, and Psychiatry, found that in patients with cerebral small vessel disease, apathy, but not depression, predicted progression to all-cause dementia. The hazard ratio was 1.49. Depression did not predict it. Apathy did. The mechanism is this. The frontal lobes, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex and the medial prefrontal cortex, are responsible for goal-directed behavior, for the experience of wanting to do something. The dopamine pathways that supply these regions degrade early in several forms of dementia, including frontotemporal dementia and Lewy body disease. When those circuits go quiet, the patient does not feel sad. They simply stop initiating. They stop calling their friends. They stop pursuing the hobbies they loved. They sit on the couch for hours and the day passes and they don't seem to mind. I'll tell you about Patricia. She was 66, recently retired, and her husband brought her to me because she had stopped doing everything she used to love. Her garden had gone to weeds. She had not picked up her knitting in months. He thought she was depressed. Her primary care physician thought so too, and had recently started her on an antidepressant. But when I asked Patricia how she felt, she did not say sad. She said, "I just don't care about it anymore." That distinction is everything. We ran extended cognitive testing. She had executive dysfunction on the trail-making test Part B, which assesses the prefrontal cortex. Her MRI showed mild frontal atrophy. We did not stop her antidepressant. That was a decision for her psychiatrist. But we added a structured behavioral activation protocol, cognitive rehabilitation with a neuropsychologist, and an exercise program. We also identified that her vitamin B12 level was borderline low and her thyroid was sluggish, both of which can mimic and amplify apathetic syndromes. After 6 months, her engagement had returned. Her family reported a measurable improvement in her initiative, and her follow-up testing showed improvement in executive function scores. So here's what I want you to do. If you have a loved one, or if you yourself have lost interest in activities that used to bring pleasure, do not dismiss it as depression without further evaluation. Apathy and depression require different workups. Ask for a thyroid panel, a vitamin B12 level, a vitamin D level, and a basic metabolic panel. Ask for a referral to a neurologist if it persists. The brain does not lose interest without a reason. That brings us to number 1, the single early warning sign that I believe is most underutilized in primary care medicine in the United States, and one that I screen for in every new patient over 60 who walks through my door. Number 1 is the loss of the sense of smell. I'm not talking about a stuffy nose. I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about a gradual, painless, progressive decline in your ability to identify common odors: the smell of coffee, the smell of soap, the smell of a freshly cut lawn. If you find that food doesn't taste the way it used to, and your tongue is fine, what you are likely experiencing is olfactory decline. A 2022 study from the National Institute on Aging, led by Dr. Qutian and published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, followed cognitively normal older adults over time using both odor identification testing and PT scans of beta amyloid and tau deposits. The researchers found that each 1-point decline in odor identification performance was associated with a 22% higher risk of developing mild cognitive impairment. That association held even after adjusting for age, sex, education, APOE epsilon 4 genetic status, smoking, and depression. A 2014 paper published in Neurology, drawing on a multi-ethnic community cohort in northern Manhattan of more than 1,000 adults, found that baseline odor identification deficits significantly predicted future cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease dementia. And a 2022 longitudinal study published in Alzheimer's and Dementia, conducted in Chicago, found that the rate of olfactory decline in cognitively normal older adults was a robust predictor of subsequent dementia diagnosis and gray matter volume loss in regions affected by Alzheimer pathology. Why does this happen? The mechanism is anatomy. The olfactory pathway in the brain runs directly through the entorhinal cortex and into the hippocampus, the very same structures where the earliest beta amyloid plaques and tau protein tangles of Alzheimer's disease accumulate, often decades before any memory symptoms appear. The olfactory bulb is, in effect, a window into the medial temporal lobe. When pathology begins to take root in those structures, smell goes first. Memory follows. By the time memory is affected, the disease process has already been underway for 10, 15, sometimes 20 years. Dorothy was 78. Her mother had died of Alzheimer's, and Dorothy had lived in fear of the disease her entire adult life. She came to me because her granddaughter had recently graduated, and Dorothy could not smell the perfume she'd given her as a gift. Her primary care doctor had told her, "Your nose is fine. Sometimes that just happens with age." I administered a formal odor identification test, the University of Pennsylvania Smell Identification Test. She scored 22 out of 40. That score is in the moderately impaired range for her age. We ran a full neurologic workup, including a brain MRI and cognitive testing. She had subtle hippocampal atrophy and a MoCA score of 26. We had identified her at the earliest possible point. We initiated an aggressive multimodal intervention based on the finger trial protocol: Mediterranean diet, structured exercise, cognitive training, and management of her vascular risk factors. 18 months later, her cognitive scores had stabilized. We had not cured anything, but we had bought her time, and time in this disease is everything. Here is your protocol. Get a scratch and sniff identification test. They are inexpensive, available online, and clinically validated. Take it at home. If you score below the normal range for your age, bring those results to your physician. Ask for a referral to a neurologist. Do not be told that your sense of smell doesn't matter. It is one of the earliest, most reliable, most cost-effective biomarkers we have for the prodromal phase of Alzheimer's disease. So let me bring this all together. Number 5, your hearing. Untreated hearing loss is the largest modifiable risk factor for dementia in the world, and it is fixable. Number 4, your blood pressure when you stand. Orthostatic hypotension is silently damaging the small vessels of your brain, and a 90-second test can identify it. Number 3, your gait speed. Your walking pace is a direct readout of the integrity of your brain's white matter, and slowing precedes memory loss by up to 9 years. Number 2, your motivation. Apathy is not depression, and it is not laziness, and it can precede dementia by years if recognized correctly. Number 1, your sense of smell. The olfactory pathway is the canary in the coal mine of the medial temporal lobe, and its decline is one of the earliest signals that something is shifting beneath the surface. Here is what I want you to understand. Your brain doesn't know how old you are. It knows what signals you are sending it. Every meal, every walk, every hour of sleep, every breath, every conversation. Whether you are 55 or 80, whether your mother had Alzheimer's or didn't, whether you felt sharp this morning or foggy, your brain retains a measurable, scientifically documented capacity to rebuild itself when you give it what it was designed to receive. The window is wider than you have been told. The interventions are more powerful than you have been led to believe. And the pessimism that surrounds aging in this country is, in my professional opinion, the single greatest obstacle to the brain health of the people I see in my exam room. Don't let the size of the change overwhelm you. Pick one item from this list, just one. Do it tomorrow, do it the day after. Consistency over 2 weeks is the single best predictor of long term adoption. You don't need motivation, you need to start. All studies referenced in this video are linked in the description. Read them, print them, bring them to your next appointment, and in the comments, tell me which item you're starting first. Number 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. I read every single one, and I will see you in the next video.